In this video, we're going to have a look at Zoom, and I'm going to share my top 7 tips for meetings, training, whatever you need to do using Zoom. I could talk about Zoom forever. There's so many great little tips, and it's been quite a challenge to find 7 that I want to share with everyone and go through them. And as usual, I'll explain the benefits and talk to you about the uses of each one of the 7. And I'm sure I'll stick in a bonus 1 or 2 as I'm going through. So I'm connecting to my Zoom meeting, and I am going to join with computer audio. And I'm just going to mute myself in the meeting. There's only me in here. It's giving me some advice as to what to do on the screen. And the reason I did join with audio is because the first tip I want to talk about is a very quick shortcut. Now, no matter what system you're using, what piece of software, if you're on a meeting, there's always a point where you're on mute and someone asks you a question and you've got to fiddle about, move your mouse, make sure the icons pop up on the screen, sometimes they disappear, and there's always that extra second or 2 of panic where you're thinking, I've got to unmute very quickly, or they're going to think I wasn't listening, I've fallen asleep maybe. One of the great things you can do on Zoom is do a quick unmute to make a point and then mute yourself again so that you're not distracting the rest of the meeting. And the way to do that is just to hold down the space bar. So just hold down the space bar on your keyboard for the duration that you want to be unmuted. You can speak, and then as soon as you let the spacebar back up, it will mute you again. So at the moment I'm on mute, you can see it says unmute there. If I hold my spacebar down, you'll see I've gone off and back onto mute really nice and quickly. So I can hold my spacebar down for as long as I want to. It'll take me off mute and then release it, and you'll pop yourself back on mute. Always just make sure your icon is muted or unmuted, whichever you want to be. I always check it just to make sure before I have another conversation or some noise is going on around me. I'll do it one more time. So I'm going to press my spacebar. I've come off mute. I'm going to release my spacebar. I'm back on mute. Really quick and easy. I didn't need to move my mouse, although it was already in that right place. I didn't need to panic or stress or anything. So that's my first tip. My second tip is all about sharing. And there's some really great sharing options in Zoom. And right down the bottom in green, I've got share screen. And this is where I'm going to go to talk to you about these options. So if I've got multiple screens open on my device, I may have a number of screens going on, I can use Control on a PC or Shift on a Mac to select multiple screens to share, which is something that I couldn't do before. The other one I want to mention in here, so it's kind of like a 2-part tip, is iPhone, iPad via AirPlay. So I do a lot of systems training on mobile devices, and getting that mobile device on the screen is really useful when you're in a meeting, so you can show people what you're doing, but you can also see what you've shared as well. So when you click on iPhone, iPad via AirPlay and click on share at the bottom, what you'll see there is on your iPhone or iPad, make sure you're connected to the same network, and then it's just giving you what to do. To tap screen mirroring, so I just scroll up on my iPhone, tap screen mirroring, and then choose Zoom done as MacBook Air. I'm on a MacBook obviously for this recording that I'm doing. And as soon as I've done that, my iPhone screen will pop up and I can start scrolling around, and everyone in the meeting or the training session can see exactly what I'm doing. It's a really great function. My third top tip and my fourth one are all about the top bar that pops up when you screen share. So I'm just going to pop that one up so you can see it. I'm just going to leave this on here just so I've got the screen sharing options at the top. So when you're sharing something on Zoom, if you're sharing an application or your iPhone, sometimes you need to change that sharing option. And rather than have them stop sharing and then reshare something else, which isn't a great experience for everyone who's in attendance with you, then the new share option is really useful. So you can use that option just to pick a new application or a new screen, or maybe even something like a whiteboard if you want to use a whiteboard, to then enable you to jump very quickly and seamlessly between different things that you're sharing. It's really useful, especially if, like myself, you jump between loads of applications, you're trying to share as much information as possible, and it's super seamless and looks really professional as well. No one else can see you fiddling around and picking it. They will just see the application that you're currently on and then your new share. So I mentioned 3 and 4 were on here. We've also got the annotate function. Annotate function is really useful when you're sharing a document, you're sharing a screen, you may be talking about a web page, you maybe want to highlight a certain area of a system or something else that you're sharing so everyone knows exactly what you're talking about. So an annotate has a really nice, useful toolbar there. You can do things like drawing, text, spotlight. You can format the colours that you're using to really make them pop out and make them really useful. And you can obviously redo, undo, clear. And what's really useful is you can save it as well. So if you do some really great annotations and highlight some bits, do some arrows, create maybe a little process map or anything that you want to do on here, you can save a snapshot of it to remember back to later, which is super useful. Once you're happy, you don't want to annotate anymore, you can clear obviously and just use this red cross in the top left hand corner of that little toolbar just to remove those options and pop back up to the top bar. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can move on to number 5. So click stop sharing there. And I want to come down to the bottom. And when you're doing any meetings or training sessions using Zoom, you want to make it as interactive as possible. So make sure you're aware of these reactions down the bottom. And I use these quite often, no matter what conferencing tool I'm using in my training. You've got some really great quick reactions. So rather than everyone unmuting and saying, yep, I totally get it, that's absolutely fine, I love it, that's hilarious, I'm crying and laughing at the same time. Everyone can use these different reactions to show their feelings or answer a question. You've also got the raise hand there as well. So if you do have a lot of people in your meeting or in your training session and everyone's on mute so that they're not talking over each other, then the raise hand function is super useful to enable people to pop the hand up so you know they've got a question that they want to answer. And you can call on them when you're ready for them to ask their question. They can unmute themselves and make their point. And remember, they can unmute themselves by pressing the space bar, saying what they need to, and then releasing the space bar and going back on mute. Just so we reduce all of those background sounds, which is really important when you're trying to focus on someone who's speaking. Loads of great options in there. I also use raise hand for things like making sure that people are still paying attention, especially if not everyone's got the video on. If you've come back from a break as well, get everyone to raise their hand so you know if you're waiting on anyone to come back from that break. So definitely give those a go. That's number 5. For number 6 and number 7, I'm going to go into the settings because I want to show you a couple of other functions, but you need to turn them on. So I'm going to go back into my main screen. I'm going to leave the meeting on for now, and I'm just going to reduce that down and it's just there at the moment. And in my main screen, I'm going to come to the cog in the top right hand corner so I can show you where my 6 and 7 top tips are. So, number 6, I want to turn on non-verbal feedback. And again, this is an extension of the hands up and the feedback that I just mentioned in the previous tip. Now I've got tons of settings in here. You can see I've got loads of options down the left hand side and loads of different things I can do, but actually I need to see more settings. So right down the bottom in blue, it says view more settings. And I'm going to click that. And it's opened up a web browser for me. So let's just reduce that zoom down. And I can see I'm in my settings and I'm in a web browser. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start scrolling down because I'm looking for meeting basics. And if I scroll a little bit of a way, I'll see some headers that say in meeting basic as I'm doing. Now you could do a Control and F and just search on the screen and find what you're looking for. But when I've got in meeting basic and I can see that at the top, if I scroll down a little bit further, I should be able to see non-verbal feedback. And I want to turn that on. So my settings automatically update. I don't need to click on save. And now when I go back to my meeting, I'll be able to see what non-verbal feedback is. But whilst I'm in here, I'm just going to turn on breakout rooms as well, because breakout rooms are really useful and I'll show you and talk to you all about those. So breakout rooms are in the next section down. They're in meetings advanced and I can see breakout rooms there. So I'm going to turn those on as well. And I do have a tick box in breakout rooms to allow the host to assign participants to breakout rooms when scheduling, which is a really useful tip. But I'm just going to come out of that and go back into my meeting. So now I'm back in my meeting and I've turned those two options on. You'll see at the bottom I've got breakout rooms, which is a new option, but you can't see non-verbal feedback. That's because it's in my reactions section. Remember that was one of my other tips where you could go in and react and put your hand up. When I click on reactions, you can now see I've got more. So you can interact with everyone in the meeting in a few different ways. Again, without having to get everyone to unmute themselves and having a lot of talking over each other. So you've got a yes, a no, a slower and a faster. So do you agree? Is everyone happy to go on lunch? Yes. Does everyone get this process? Do you understand the product? Someone might click on no so you can refresh and go over what you're talking about. And then the slower and the faster are useful just to make sure the pace is really suitable for the audience that you're in. So a really useful way of adding some extra options with that non-verbal feedback, and you need to turn that on in your settings like I did. The other one was breakout rooms. So let's click on breakout rooms. And these are really useful to split a bigger group up into smaller rooms. To have a conversation, to work through a problem, or to do a piece of work separately, and then bring everyone back into the main room. Again, you've got to turn this on in your settings. Once you've turned it on in settings, then you can decide how many breakout rooms you want. You can assign people automatically, you can assign people manually, and you can even now let participants choose the room they want to go in. You might be doing a bit of a conference and you've got a couple of speakers and you want your participants to decide which section of the conference, which speaker they want to listen to, and give them the flexibility to be able to move in between those breakout rooms. So choose how many you need and decide how you want to assign people. And click on create, and then you'll have those breakout rooms. Nice and easy to work with. So that's my top 7 tips. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I've talked about quite a few different things all the way through this video. I always tend to like to give some extra bonuses. Use the tips to unmute and mute yourself, really useful one. But also use the chat as well if you want to just ask a question, make a comment or anything like that. And then my final point before I end this video, Zoom, like any other application, is constantly getting updated. And to make sure you have the freshest new functionality, you can engage as much as possible. When you're on this screen, what I suggest every so often is just come into the top right hand corner where my initials are. And then if you scroll down, if you look down that option list, fourth from the bottom, you've got check for updates. So on a regular basis, weekly, 2 weekly, however often you come into Zoom, just check for updates and make sure you've got the most up-to-date software so you can use all of the great functionality that Zoom keep creating and pushing into their application. Have a go at those tips, see what you can do with Zoom, and let us know how you get on.